From the east comes the sun, bringing a new and unspoiled day. It has already circled the earth and looked upon distant lands and faraway peoples. It has passed over mountain ranges and the waters of the seven seas. It has shone upon laborers in the fields, into the windows of homes and shops and factories. It has beheld proud cities with gleaming towers and also the hovels of the poor. It has been witness to both good and evil, the work of honest people and the conspiracy of knaves. It has seen marching armies, bomb-blasted villages, and the destruction which wastes away at noonday. And now, unsullied from its tireless journey, it comes to us, messenger of the morning, harbinger of a new day. Good morning and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, you have blue on.
Yes, I discovered that blue is the color for today. My name is Reverend Hank Purse. My pronouns are he, him, and his. It is so nice to be here. Steve and I have known each other since seminary. We weren't at the same school, but we've known each other since then, and he didn't tell me how great this place is. Wow, this is spectacular. This is so great. So great. It is truly a joy for me to be here this morning. I even brought some friends, which is nice to have them here this morning too. The words of our chalice lighting. Wait, so I'll read and you light. Is that how that works? Like the Roman god Janus, god of beginnings and endings, transitions and even doorways. We gather with part of us looking backwards and part of us looking forwards. We gather on the edge of the new year, saddened by our losses, cherishing our joys, aware of our failures, mindful of days gone by. We light our chalice, eager to begin anew, hopeful for what lies ahead, promising to make changes, anticipating tomorrows and tomorrows. Would you join me in singing our first hymn? It is in the silver and gray hymnal in your pew, and actually the words are just in your order of worship as well. It is hymn number 1, New Year. We're going to start at the beginning. Here we go. Hymn number 1, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door. A lovely blessing for our new year. Please rise as you are able and willing. May nothing evil cross this door, and may ill fortune never pry about these windows. May the roar and rain go by. By faith made strong, the rafters will withstand the battering of the storm. This heart through all the world grows chill, will keep you warm. We shall walk softly through these rooms, touching our lips with holy wine, till every casual corner blooms into a shrine. With laughter drown the raucous shout, and though these sheltering walls are thin, may they be strong to keep hate out and hold love in. Please be seated. I was recently at my home church. I grew up in the First Unitarian Church in New Bedford. I was there for a sad reason. My mother had passed away, and there were lovely tributes. My mother was the matriarch of the church, And there are all sorts of lovely tributes, and I was showing my nephew's daughters around the church. They'd never been there before. And some of the things that were put out, my mother ran a coffee house, like a folk music coffee house there, and so there were signs from there. And then there were a number of footstools. And I remembered this story. When I was, I don't know, I was maybe 7 or 8, my mother was the head of the Women's Alliance, the women's group there in the church. And someone pointed out, like the custodian had discovered, it was the church, this enormous stone building with all kinds of rooms, and someone had discovered in a small room all of these beat up old footstools. And my mother saw them and went, here is an opportunity for us to pull everyone together. So she announced that she brought up all these banged up, dingy looking footstools on the next Sunday and got up and said, the Women's Alliance is going to do this, but you don't have to be a member of the Women's Alliance. You don't have to be a woman. Anyone can do this. And so they just sort of handed out these footstools. Take them, refurbish them, recover them, and it was this great event. People talked about what they were doing. I remember as a little kid hearing about, I knew what my mom was doing, but then hearing from other folks what they were doing. And then on this one spectacular day, I remember my sister and myself and my friend Ron Kellaway, us running up and down the aisles because everyone had brought in their new footstool. And they had them in the pews, and we were all running around looking at them as little kids do. And it was great. My mother was a rug hooker, so her cover had flowers on it that she hooked, and other people did needlepoint, and other people just got fabric and recovered them, and other people were woodworkers, and they refinished the wood, and it was great. And some were long, and some were short, and some were stout, and I loved that, and it was so great seeing them there at my mom's service, because I think one of the things that I loved about them too as a little kid is that it reminded me about the people who come to our church. They are long and tall and skinny and stout and overstuffed. And some are finely decorated and some are sort of sloppy. But that's who we are. And it's one of the things that I've always kept with me. From a time I was, a little kid, all the way to today, is the beauty and the diversity of the people who come here. Even if we all, if we all answered, we might all fill in the same box in a census of how we look, we all know that we're different. We've had different life experiences, and we bring them all here to make this place, to make this community what it is. At this time, normally I would send the kids out, but with that, I'm just going to stop and let you introduce the time of joys, sorrows, and milestones. Let us open our hearts in prayer. Thou, you who are known by many names and yet by no name fully known, we stand here at the ridgepole of the year, aware of the potential of this new year, but also aware of the creeping fear that hangs in the air. We look forward to this year and pray for the best for ourselves and for others. We hold in our hearts this morning those killed in New Orleans, And also this morning, we are grateful for the life and the example of President Jimmy Carter. Reverend Julian Soto wrote these words: "May we be reminded that no resolution that, if kept, will make us more worthy of love. There is no resolution that, if kept, will make life less uncertain and allow us to control the political leanings of others, nor allow us to control our children or the way that other people act. So this year, may we give ourselves the gift of low expectations, so that we can be proud of the smallest of our accomplishments. And God, may we manage our expectations, the expectations of those in our lives, so that we notice and cherish every small, lovely thing about them. May we expect so little out of 2025 that we can celebrate every single thing it offers us, however small, because we deserve joy and not disappointment. Amen and blessed be." Should I do do you want to do the offering, or should I do that? All right, okay. You go down.
It's time now for our collection, and with it, something silly to loosen you up. Simply, why did the Unitarian cross the road? She was supporting the chicken, following its own unique search for truth and meaning. Please give generously. We appreciate all that you give.
Do you have the reading? Oh, you printed it again. I have it here.
I remember when I first heard this reading. It's by Naomi Shihab Nye, Gate A4. Wandering around the Albuquerque Airport terminal, after learning my flight had been delayed for 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate A4 understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate A4 was my own gate, and I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor, wailing loudly. "Help," said the flight service person. "Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her the flight was going to be late, and she did this. I stooped to put my arm around the woman and spoke to her haltingly. Shudawa, Shubiktuk, Habiti, Stani Shwe, Min Fadlik, Shubitsi Way. The minute she heard any words she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for major medical surgery the next day. I said, no, we're fine. You'll get there, just later. Who's picking you up? Let's call him. We called her son, and I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and would ride next to her, Southwest. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and she spoke to him for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took up to about 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling about her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamoul cookies, little powdered sugar crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, out of her bag, and was offering them to the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo, we were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. There was no better cookie. And then the airline broke out free beverages from huge coolers, and the 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving all of us apple juice, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag. Some medicinal thing with green furry leaves. Such an old country tradition. Always carry a plant. Always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in. The shared world. Not a single person at that gate, once the crying of confusion stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can happen anywhere. Not everything is lost.
imagine there are some prisoners who were captured and they've been chained in a cave for as long as they can remember. And they're chained in such a way that all they can see is the back side of this cave. And every morning, when the sun rises and shines into the cave, shadows pass by on the back wall. The shadows of people and animals and objects going by the mouth of the caves. The shape of the shadows change depending on where the sun is at different times of the day and different times of the year. But the prisoners have gotten very good at being able to identify the different shadows. Oh, there's that little dog. Oh, and there's an older woman, and it seems like she's carrying something. Some sort of chair, or maybe even a footstool. And then one day, one of these prisoners is released. He's dragged up to the mouth of the cave and left there. At first, the light is too bright, too strong for him to understand or be able to see anything. But slowly, after a while, his eyes begin to adjust. And he's able to see the real world outside of the cave. The world outside. And soon, a little dog comes by, and it sniffs him, and he's able to reach out. He's able to touch its furry body and feel its wet nose. Then he's able to see an elderly woman go by, and she is carrying a footstool. And then after a few days, he realizes that the figures that he's experiencing in real life, the ones that he's interacting with, are the things that were casting shadows back on the walls of the cave. He realizes that the shadows that he and his friends, his comrades were seeing there were just that. They were shadows. They weren't real. Even though they believed them to be real, because they'd forgotten all about the outside, but he realizes that there's a real world and there's a shadow world. And he feels like he needs to go back and tell his friends all about what he's seen. And so that's what he does. He goes back to tell his comrades about the difference between the real world and the world of shadows. Goes back to the cave. And he tells them what he's seen outside the cave, and at first they just think he's crazy. And they laugh at him, and they ask if he can decipher the shadows on the wall like they all can and like he used to be able to. But now it's been too long. He can't really tell what the shadows are anymore. But he keeps trying to tell them about the real world out there. Over and over again, he keeps trying to tell them, and after a while they get tired of this. And they think that he's actually making fun of them. And they get upset. And they get angry. And they even shove him. And they get violent with him. Because they don't like this version of reality that he is sharing. Now, I'm sure many of you recognize this as Plato's story of the cave. Plato, that great philosopher, told this story for two reasons. First, to say that it's difficult to be a philosopher trying to educate the public. The second was to point out his idea about ideal forms. The first one. Plato said that most people are comfortable in their ignorance. And that some may even be hostile to anyone who points that out. Socrates, his mentor and friend, was sentenced to death by the Athenian government for disrupting the social order. We don't have to think that far back, do we, to think of those who got upset, who violently resisted the truth that many of us knew. Tomorrow is the anniversary of that January 6th upheaval in Washington, D.C., that riot, where thousands of people believed that their votes were being taken away. They were violently resisting the truth that the rest of us knew. They were living in a world of shadows, or upset being told anything different. Many years ago, I used to belong to an online chat group of clergy. And on this chat group, there were hundreds and hundreds of different clergy. People of different ages, different abilities, different races, different classes, different expressions of their gender. However, even with all these different people, this chat group tended to be dominated by a group of older white guys. Guys who are older and whiter than even me. As a friend pointed out recently, we are stale, pale, and male. You can write that down and use that later on. No matter what happened on this chat group, because this chat group was for support. Sometimes people were announcing things, but other times people would come on and sort of say, oh, I'm having this problem in my church, I don't know what to do. Looking for some support, or even just someone to say, I'm so sorry. Ministry can be so isolating at times, especially if you're living outside of New England, away from New England. It can be so isolating. And so people turn to this chat group for support. But no matter what happened in this chat group, no matter what was written about, what questions were asked, this group of older white guys tended to try to steer the conversation back to being about them. And not surprisingly, folks got frustrated with this. Over and over again it happened. People got frustrated with them, and the guys would then react and say, why are you attacking us? Which in itself is rather infuriating. And every few months, there'd be a big blowout. People would leave the chat group. And after one of these big blowouts, a friend got onto the chat group and started writing about Copernicus. He thought this simple illustration will get everyone to understand. So he starts to write about Copernicus. And I know that you are thinking to yourself, Hank, it is the first day of the new year, and we've already heard about Plato, and now you're going to tell us about Copernicus, and I say, yes, it's true, but stick with me, Now, so Copernicus, as you all remember, was that 15th century astronomer and mathematician. And it was he who realized that the Earth was not the center of the universe. At least in the West. He was the first Westerner who pointed out that the Earth was not the center of the universe. Up until that time in the West, everyone had just assumed that the Earth was the center of the universe. They believed the Earth was the center and that everything revolved around us. But he said, no. The Earth, in fact, revolves around our sun in our solar system. Before Copernicus, people thought the Earth was the center of the universe, the sun revolving around it. Then Copernicus came and said, no, the sun's the center, the Earth revolves around that. A few decades later, another astronomer came by and said, no, you know what? The sun itself is only one star among an infinite number of universes. And none of this has a center. For pre-Copernican people, hard to say, pre-Copernican people, who knew the earth as the center of the universe, it must have been really frustrating to interact with others who related to the actual infinite universe in which there was no center. These days, pre-Copernican people roam the earth. Seeing their perspective as objective, their priorities as normal, and their needs as primary. It feels good. It feels good to be the center of the universe. Almost all institutions that we have been a part of, all the policies, all the books and dictionaries, uphold this guiding fiction that we are the center of the universe. Every institution that most of us have grown up in still hold this point of view that white men from the West are the center of the universe. In that chat group, one of the things that made people really frustrated was that every once in a while, in a generous moment, a pre-Copernican member of our chat group would entertain the perspective of, say, an African-American woman. But only if her opinions orbit, accept, and affirm the centrality of the truth that is their understanding, that they are the center of the universe. It happened in the chat group. It happens out there. Maybe it happens in here. So this church seems very nice, but I'm sure it might happen every once in a while. Here is a list of the world's fastest growing cities. Fuzhou, Ankara, Xiamen, Hangzhou, Kunming, Dubai, Bursa, Istanbul. What all of these cities, these centers of vitality, have in common is that none of those cities are driven by a pre-Copernican white man's perspective. None of those cities were created by the fruit of the Enlightenment, or even a reaction to it. So when the pre-Copernican white man insists that his perspective is the objective truth, not only is he inaccurate, but he's also increasingly absurd. This is, once again, not to say that me and you are like completely woke and completely got it. We still carry the baggages of our education, of our experiences. But still, it's absurd, and we need to realize when we too are being absurd. Still, these pre-Copernican folk, when challenged, speak louder and with bravado, trying to steer us back into the orbit of their pre-Copernican Earth. They want us to believe that the shadows on the wall are real, and that the universe revolves around them. Now, the second point why Plato told the story of the cave was to explain his concept about ideal forms. Like the shadows on the walls, things in the physical world are just flawed reflections of an ideal form. Plato believed that everything in the real world were just mere shadows of an ultimate ideal form. So when I talked about footstools this morning, each one of you imagined a different footstool. And if we were somehow able to print out an image, put it on the big screen, an image of what each one of us thought of a footstool, they would all be different. Every one of those footstools would have been different. And yet, there would have been something footstoolish about all of them. Plato theorized that there must be an ultimate footstool someplace that all other footstools look like or are based upon. Theologians who came after Plato loved this idea because they extended his idea not only to physical things, but to emotions and to values, so that there must be an ultimate form of truth, an ultimate form of love. Christian theologians took this idea and said, yes, and it is God who is the one. God is the keeper of all of these ultimate ideals. It is God who is the ultimate form of love. It is God who knows the ultimate truth. God is the great librarian, the keeper of all of these ideal forms. Now, how this influences us as Unitarian Universalists is the idea that only God has the truth. What that means is that all of us have a little bit of the truth, but no one person knows everything. This realization should keep us hungry and humble. What it teaches us as Unitarian Universalists is that we all have a part of the truth. We can even sort of move past that God has all the truth, but we can all understand this idea that we all have a part of the truth. No one person has all of the truth. No one group, no one country, no one has all the truth. So this should leave us hungry, striving to find out more truth. But it should also keep us humble, knowing that we will never get to know everything. It was this understanding that allowed the Transcendentalists to explore other religious traditions, to realize and to coin the phrase that revelation is not sealed. The revelation of God did not just happen at one point 2,000 years ago in the Middle East, but that it is ongoing. It has occurred. The truth of the sacred has occurred throughout human history, to different people in different places, in different ages, to women and men and children. That allowed the Transcendentalists want to explore this, and allows us to understand and value truths that come from other traditions, and how they can inform us and help us understand the world as well. I had a professor in seminary who was teaching a class on Buddhism. And he had us read some really, a bunch of books and stories that were so different from one another. The first thing he had us read was the Diamond Sutra, which the only thing I remember about it was it was a Diamond Sutra because it was hard to understand. It was really hard to understand, but okay, we got through that. We had a discussion next week. The reading the next week was about a Buddhist monk who rode a motorcycle. The week after that, we read something which didn't seem Buddhist at all, and by this time, all of the students were saying, like, okay, you have to stop. We don't understand why you're having us read these different understandings of Buddhism. And he said, if I taught the history of Buddhism the same way that often if you go and learn about the history of Christianity, I teach you about the culture that Buddha was born into, his life, maybe his death, and maybe 100 years or so afterwards. And then you'd leave this classroom, and you'd go out in the world, and you'd meet real Buddhists, and you'd see how they practice Buddhism, and you'd say, this is nothing what I was told and taught in school. He said, instead, I want you to think of this class like a glass prism that you hang in your window. And each side of it allows you to, each side that you're able to look in gives you another window into what is the center of Buddhism. You'll never know everything, but it allows you to have another window in. And what comes out of it is beautiful. As Unitarian Universalists, We think about the Platonic concept of ideal forms differently. We acknowledge that no one has all the truth about the truth, or the sacred, or God. We don't believe that one person or one group has the truth about religion. Some may have studied more, reflected more, experienced more, and these things are brought in and shared, and the whole becomes richer for it. If you've ever been a part of a small group here in this religious community, you know that experience. That people that you might have known for years, you might have taught Sunday school together with them, you might have been in the choir with them, you think you know everything about them, and then you come down and you're asked about people's experiences, and all of a sudden you discover they are very different from you. And that, what they bring, enriches the group, enriches people's understanding of each other, and perhaps even of yourself. This is the basis of Unitarian Universalist theology. This is how we can have someone who is a Christian, and someone who is a Buddhist, and someone who is a humanist together in the same church. Heck, maybe even in the same car driving home. This is what allows you to have the symbols of major world religions on your wall. This understanding that everyone holds a little bit of the truth allows us to have a theological diversity that we prize. Because it allows us to continue on that journey to gather more information, to get closer to what the truth may actually be. Thinking of the reading, thinking of that older woman who was crying, and the airline staff were frustrated because they didn't understand each other. Maybe that's what the role of our faith is. Maybe the role of our faith in this world is to help those whose understandings of the world and the universe are different. Bringing people together with words of compassion, asking questions where people can share their humanity and share their life experiences. And at the end, we all get cookies. This is the world I want to live in. The shared world. And I bet it is the world that you want to live in as well. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. Our closing hymn, once again, is in our silver hymnal, or in your order service, 187, It Sounds Along the Ages. Please rise as you are able and willing. The words of our benediction from the Icon community in Northern Ireland The task has ended. Go in pieces. Our faith has been rear-ended, certainty amended, and something might be mended that we didn't know was torn. And we are fire, bright burning fire, turning from the higher places from which we fell, emptying ourselves into the hell in which we'll find our loving and beloved brother, mother, sister, father, friend. And so, friends, the task has ended. Go in pieces to see and to feel your world. And I extinguish our chalice.
Please join the choir in enjoying our last song. Here Comes the Sun is a song about the hope for better times to come and a more positive outlook on life. The song's message is universal and timeless and can be applied to the idea that no matter how long, how cold and lonely a winter may seem, the sun is going to come again.
Our worship is over. Our service begins. I believe there's coffee and cookies next door.